No audio, so that was my bad.
Okay.
I didn't see that the audio wasn't there. So if you want to just give that intro again.
No problem. So my name is Rodier, and I'm a software developer from Tyler Tech, software engineer. We are hiring. If you're interested, come talk to me afterwards. And as I give this presentation, if at any point you have any questions or concerns or comments, feel free to just interrupt me. Let me know. I'd love to hear from you. Some of the things I am going to say are going to be controversial. And if you disagree, that's okay. I look forward to having a lively discussion. So could you hit the slide, please, first slide. All right. So why should you care about big O notation? For one thing, big O notation can make your code better and your algorithms better. Now, and like I said, faster and more efficient. I have been in several interviews where I have been asked about big O notation. So it's important for you to know the basics. In a couple of those interviews, I did not give a very good answer, and I think that's one of the reasons I didn't pass. But we're going to give you the tools so that you can get your career of your dreams, or you can get promoted by being able to write better code. All right, let's go to the next one. All right, first thing I want to talk about is you can't improve your algorithms without improving your functions. So I want to talk about a couple of tips to make sure that your functions are as good as they can be. First rule, simple is always better than complex. As I've become a more experienced software engineer, my functions have actually gotten simpler. And of course, that part of it is because I'm using shorthand. First of all, I want to talk about simplifying your if statements. This will reduce errors. So for example, take this class here, it's a queue. When it's instantiated, it creates an empty array. So let's say you want to find out if this array, it truly is empty. So what you would do is you do this if statement. So if q, the array, equals 0, return true or false. Notice, this if statement doesn't have any brackets. You don't always have to do brackets. You can do indentation. If it's just one line. If you have more than one line, then you can't do this. This is one way to simplify. That way you don't get in what I call bracket hell. And bracket hell is no bueno. Now let's take a look at this queue. Remember, this is the exact same queue. We instantiate this empty array, and then we have another function called queueIsEmpty. So what's the difference between this one and this one? Can anybody tell me?
If you use that one, then at least when you go to add a line there, you won't have an error in your code, because as soon as you add a line there, you're hosed.
Yeah, this is true. These basically do the exact same thing, except it's on one line. This helps you avoid errors because of bad indentation or bad bracketing. So you can simplify your if statements. These still return a boolean, but this one is much simpler and it's easier to debug, and I think it looks better, which is, that's a subjective statement and you can disagree with me, and that's okay. Let's go to the next slide. All right. So don't run your functions or your loops longer than what you have to. When you're looping through, as soon as you get what you want, it's time to stop. There's no reason to continue running through it. For example, here is a bad example. So this function determines if you have duplicates in your array. So first it declares a set. Now a set is kind of like an array, except it only holds unique values. For example, it can hold 1, 2, 3, 4, but it can't hold 1, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4. Only one at a time. And then, so this is a for in loop. You don't always have to do the whole for loop, because oftentimes it takes a lot of time to type out all this information. This is more shorthand. This also helps you avoid errors when you're doing shorthand and simplicity. The downside is if you want to jump to, you can't do that with this for in a loop array. But if you're going to go through everything, you can do that. So the first thing is it's looping through the value. It determines if the set has the value, then add it to the set. If it doesn't have the value, then set this boolean here to be true, and then it returns the boolean. What's the problem with this one? It goes through all of this is the array that I'm sending in. It goes through all the arrays to here to find out. Now imagine this was like 1,000 units long. That's pointless. You're wasting your time. It should know by this one, because this is 1, 1. So this is the same thing, has duplicates, but what we're doing here is if the loop does, if it's, remember, we're doing the set thing, this exact same thing. If the set does have that value, then it returns true. So this return statement, what it's going to do is it's going to stop the function completely and just return true. So by the time you're here, boom, you know. You don't have to run through everything. And also you can use a break function in your loops, or sometimes you can use a continue function. But anytime you use return in an array or in a function, that just stops the function. And you move on with life. All right, let's go to the next one. All right, dry. Don't repeat yourself. This is gonna save time. So for example, we're back to the queue. Remember, we established a constructor that determines that creates an empty array. And let's say we want to do this function which is called pop. What pop does is it takes the first item in the array and it removes it and it returns it. So first we want to know, does this array actually have anything? So it says this.q.length equals 0. Now and then it returns it. Now this one is peak. This, all it does, it shows you the first. Look, if the same thing again, this is repetitive and bad coding. This is repeating myself. It's leaving myself to error because there can be misspellings, which is a very common error. Also, it's not one centralized place that I can go to debug. The other problem is it's not modular because I'm having to copy and paste. Now this is the exact same thing. Q, we set an empty constructor in pop, but instead we use this. Q is empty, so this Q is empty. It tells if it's empty or not. So what this will do is if I have a problem, I know exactly where to go. It's a one-stop shop. I can reuse this code over and over and over and over and over again. This way I'm not repeating myself and I'm being efficient with my code. Plus, I think this is better looking. And if it's better looking, it's going to put less strain on your eyes. That's a little bit subjective, but that's where we're heading. Next slide, please. All right, here's just some tips to improve your functions. First one, you want to keep your functions 3 to 4 lines. Now, I know in some cases that's not going to be possible. Some cases, you just can't do that. But where you can, simplify. Also, your function should only be doing one thing at a time. This helps reduce error, and that way it helps debug, because you're only having to worry about one thing. Now, you can nest a function. That means you write function and you declare a function within a function. Try not to do that. Put it outside and call that function. Also, when you have a very large function, break it up into smaller functions. That way it's modular. You can reuse that code over and over. And try to limit the parameters to max 2 or 3. I know in some cases we can't always do that, but this will make it simpler and easier to process. Now, if your function is good, a junior developer should be able to glance at the function and know exactly what it does, just at a glance. That is how you can tell a graceful and an elegant function. Next slide, please. All right, function names should be descriptive. You should avoid vague names like getInfo. Everything we have to do has to do with getting info. Keep in mind that other developers, namely you, are going to at some point going to have to come back to that code to debug or to fix it. And you want to make life easier on your future self. So better functions are easier debugging. Now there's one developer who was programming an API and he named the functions after Pokemon moves. I kid you not. There's absolutely no reason to do that. That's why you want your functions to be descriptive and simple. Now, I can talk to you all day, but what's going to make you good at algorithms is practice and time. That's why I highly recommend Code Wars and LeetCode. They're free. They're great ways to practice your algorithms. And if you're new, this is going to teach you to think like a computer programmer. Next slide, please. Next thing, we're going to talk about something very controversial. Comments in code. Now you laugh, but it's true. I mean, I've heard many things about this from different employers. So there's two schools of thought when it comes to comment in code. School one, comments should be used as documentation for developers. Versus the second school is properly written code does not need comments. Remember, getting back to what I said, that if it's a properly written function, a junior developer should be able to glance at it and say, that's what that does, easily. Now, I'm more in the second camp, but there are some times where, for example, I was looking at some legacy code, and there was this huge Godzilla of a function. And there was no way I was going to refactor it. I didn't have the time, and I didn't have permission to do that. But someone had put some code, some comments, to help me understand. So comments has its place in time, but but for the most part, you don't need to put it everywhere. All right. Yes, next slide, please. All right, let's get to what we made, the big O notation. Why does it matter? What is it?